Neale was a Daniher, and the Daniher name has always meant family, fight, football and faith. Neale carried all to the very end. To the Daniher family, you lent us your dad, your husband, your son and your brother. He became our hero, and we are forever in your debt. On Monday morning, King's birthday, a friend texted at 9:55 a.m. saying he'd just bought beanies at the ground. He texted, and you won't believe who was serving me behind the counter. Jan Daniher. The Danihers, workers, doers, high on values. Please welcome Neale's much-loved and incredible wife, Jan Daniher.
Thank you to the Prime Minister and Premier for your reflections on Neale. I'd like to thank everyone who is here at the G today to celebrate Neale's life with our family and those watching via broadcast and live stream. I would also like to thank Dr. Susan Mathers, all the medical team and the allied health workers. Your care and dedication meant so much to Neale and to our family. Special mention to Neale's carers, who made it possible for Neale to stay at home. You adapted to constant change, new equipment, and all of Neale's needs with so much patience and kindness. You also had to put up with a lot of eye rolling from Neale, and I'm incredibly grateful for all your support. I want to start with a monologue that was one of Neale's and my favourites. It comes from the movie Parenthood. In one scene, Grandma is talking to her son about life. She describes it as a choice between a merry-go-round and a roller coaster. The merry-go-round goes round and round, safe, predictable, comfortable. But the roller coaster takes you up and down and around sharp turns. It can be frightening, exhilarating, sickening and thrilling all at once. Some people prefer the merry-go-round. Grandma chose the roller coaster, and so did Neale. The roller coaster, a metaphor for life, unpredictable, full of highs and lows, sudden turns and unexpected challenges. Neale often said, life doesn't promise to be fair. He learned that early, and he learned that with every challenge comes opportunity. His first major challenge came while he was playing football at Essendon. He was playing good football, so I'm told, when he ruptured his first ACL. 3 knee reconstructions followed. Each time he worked relentlessly to regain his strength and return to the game he loved. Eventually, though, his footy career came to an end. So Neale reset. Neale and I met at a family friend's 21st up near Horsham, just before Neale did his first ACL. We decided to catch up back in Melbourne. We were both studying in the city, so our first date was a lunch in a dark old pub on Swanston Street that had a very limited menu of sausages, lamb's fry and chips. I'm fairly sure this was Neale's way of checking just to see how down to earth I was. I must have passed the test. We were married in 1985 and we were married for 41 years. We had a lot in common, including a love of family and sport. I saw firsthand the love Neale had for his family, though I have to say the first visit to the farm was a bit daunting, staying in a house with Jim and Edna and their 11 kids. It was busy, loud, and it was so much fun, and there was plenty of laughter. Playing sport was incredibly important to both of us. Neale played football and I played netball. Back then, footy and netball were played on Saturday afternoons. So I never saw Neale play for Essendon firsts. But the lessons sport taught us helped set us up for life. Working as a team, learning to win and to lose, learning resilience and discipline. Neale loved to learn, constantly absorbing, questioning and growing. He couldn't understand why I like to read fiction books. He always said, "I watch movies for enjoyment and I read to learn." He studied computer science, theology, finance. He worked in the computer science industry and then he found his way into coaching. Later in life, his focus switched to philosophy and psychology, always wanting to better understand people and life. But the most important role of all was becoming a father to our 4 children, Loz, Luke, Beck and Ben. It gave him a new perspective on life. He adored being a dad, and it gave his life its greatest meaning. With every change and every hurdle and disappointment, Neale adjusted. He always found a way forward and always found meaning in what came next. He began his senior coaching career at the Melbourne Football Club in 1997. He loved coaching, he loved the Melbourne Footy Club, and he loved his players, even if at times I think they may have questioned that. When his time ended at Melbourne, Neale once again looked for the next challenge. He worked with the AFL to establish what became the AFL Coaches Association, where he served as the CEO. Then came another chapter. In 2009, Neale became the General Manager of Football Operations at the West Coast Eagles, and we were fortunate enough to spend 7 years in the West. It was in Perth that Neale first noticed the weakness in his hand. Life was full, we were busy, and things were going really well. As with every family, facing an MND diagnosis doesn't prepare you for being told there is no treatment, no cure, and that the life expectancy is around 27 months. It's devastating, and it was almost impossible to believe. But Neale took on the challenge, as he did with all the others, head on. Together with Pat Cunningham and Dr. Ian Davis and our families, we all found a new focus and purpose. We chose something positive. We chose something positive to work towards, to fight MND. We rode the bumps and the drops and the sharp curves, never knowing what was to come next. There were moments of joy and sadness, fear and love, strength and determination. It wasn't easy, it was incredibly difficult, but we faced each challenge together and we never gave up. We were incredibly lucky that Neale got to meet his 6 beautiful grandchildren. But MND doesn't define Neale. Neale is defined by his character, his integrity, his humility, his honesty, his strength and resilience. By his sharp wit, his cheeky smile, his love of family and friends, and his wonderful love of laughter. This is how we will remember Neale. I love you, darling. Thank you.
Wife of the Year, married to an Australian of the Year. What an incredible woman. What a combination. I was looking at Jan as she was speaking, and the portrait of Neale behind me has been painted by Vincent Fantuzzo. It was one of Neale's favourites. Welcome to you, Vincent, too. So we get to Neale and Jan's 4 children, Loz, Luke, Beck and Ben Daniher.
We've had 13 years to prepare for this. 13 years we are so grateful for. But I've learned over the past fortnight that no preparation eases the pain of losing someone you love. Neale was a lot of things to a lot of different people. Many of you knew him or knew of him as the footballer, the coach, the MND advocate. But to Luke, Beck, Ben and I, he was Dad. And while we are his biological children, it was no secret that the Melbourne boys were like sons to him too. Dad was like all good parents, just trying to work it all out as he went. Now, he didn't always get it right, which makes me laugh because he was such a perfectionist. He forgot to pick us up from school, he left Beck at Little Laths, and within 5 minutes of our first fishing trip, the rods, bait, and his mobile phone fell off Freo Pier. Dad was stubborn, immovable, impatient, traits that could try you at times, but they were also the very qualities that meant when he committed to something, he gave it absolutely everything. Dad had an innate ability to bring people together. He started a neighbourhood club, organising regular catch-ups, backyard barbecues, music games. He loved creating those connections. Even when getting out and about became more limited, he found other ways. His WhatsApp groups became his way of staying connected. No matter the circumstances, he always found a way to bring people together. Dad was my sounding board, and a very reliable one at that. Not because he told me what I wanted to hear, but because he always told me what he actually thought. You never had to wonder where you stood with Dad. If you asked for his opinion, you got the real thing. No sugarcoating, no fluff, just honest, straight from the heart feedback. And at times, that honesty could catch you off guard, but it was also one of the things I came to rely on most. Because beneath the bluntness was something incredibly steady, someone who cared enough to be truthful, who took the time to listen, and who was always there for you, no matter what. One of the most special roles Dad ever took on was being Poppy Neale to Rosie, Cooper, Billy, Ollie, Grace, and Hazel. Dad took every role in his life seriously, and being Pop was no exception. In fact, I think it was one of the roles he treasured most. Dad became a Pop after his MND diagnosis, and as time went on and things got harder, Dad didn't step back from the role, he made it his own. Even when he couldn't talk or run after his grandkids, he found his own way to be present, to be their Pop. I'll miss the little moments that said so much about that. Rosie leaning on his chair, looking up at his eye gaze, patiently watching him type. Grace walking up and asking for a third Freddo frog, and Dad typing, "Okay." He'd never do that for us. The smile on his face when the kids walked through the door, and watching him take it all in as the kids put on their backyard dance concerts. Dad always said that when life throws you a challenge, you have two options. You can flourish or you can fold. And didn't you flourish? None of this was easy. Losing the ability to communicate, to move, to breathe. You could have complained, but you never did. You got up each day and focused on what you could do, and you made the most of every single moment. You could have folded, but you never did. And I have endless admiration for that determination. Even when the beast was delivering its final blows, the last thing Dad communicated to Mum and I was that he wanted to get up. Even when his body was failing, his mind was still fighting on right to the very end. I'll miss walking through the front door and seeing you smile from your chair. I will miss the look of annoyance when I misunderstood what you were trying to communicate. And if you're wondering what that look is, just Google a picture of Dad from his coaching days. I will miss that cheeky grin you would have on your face while you typed a smart-ass comment. And I will miss the wink you would give us when we sorted what you needed. We will play on for you, Dad. I love you.
When you're asked to speak at your father's funeral, particularly a state funeral, I thought I'd be spending many days trying to work out what to say. The truth is, Dad made it easy. Because there was one thing that Dad gave me that helped make sense of life, it was an acronym. WITO. WITO, which stands for Where is the Opportunity? Dad taught us that life isn't a matter of if things will get tough, it's just a matter of when and how often. The question wasn't, why me? The question was, where is the opportunity? And trust me, Dad found opportunities everywhere. Sometimes where the rest of us couldn't see them, sometimes where the rest of us wished he couldn't. Take his chocolate and biscuits. Many of you know Dad as the footballer, the coach, the campaigner. I knew him as a man with a sweet tooth who occasionally hid his chocolate biscuits from us 4 kids. One day, I discovered the hiding spot and identified an opportunity. A wonderful opportunity. I recruited Beck into the mission. Of course, she wanted nothing to do it, but was happy to be my stepladder. As I performed my version of Jezelenko, you beauty, on Beck's shoulders, I secured the biscuits. I escaped down the back stairs feeling pretty good about myself. I looked back at Beck with a grin that said, "See, easy." And her face turned from excitement to horror. As a shadow grew over us, I turned around to see Dad standing there. I'm sure the old D's boys know what face he had on. Apparently, Dad had identified an opportunity as well. The opportunity to teach me a lesson. But I wasn't going down without a fight. Fresh off winning the Grade 3 50-metre sprint, I thought I had him covered. The plan was simple: make it to the hills hoist, and somehow Dad would throw in the towel. Needless to say, I didn't make it to the hills hoist. And the lessons, actions have consequences, but more importantly, lessons are opportunities. As kids, we thought Dad was teaching us resilience. As adults, I realised he was teaching us perspective. If you're committed to something, you see it through. If life got tough, have a crack anyway. If things don't go to plan, learn from it. Dad wasn't big on excuses. He was big on effort. He was big on action. He was big on family. One of the last pieces of advice Dad gave me was, remember when striving to achieve goals, sometimes you can forget to enjoy the here and now. Every day has something special to offer you. Don't miss it. That was Dad. Always looking for an opportunity right in front of him. Not next year, not someday, today. One of Dad's happiest memories wasn't a football memory at all. It was watching the children become parents and seeing the grandchildren grow. The older I get, the more I realise Dad's greatest legacy isn't what he achieved, it's what he passed on. The values, the perspective, the example. Dad often spoke about a saying from football: when it's your turn to go, you go. When MND came calling, Dad didn't ask why. He didn't step back, he stepped forward. Because if he expected others to fight, he knew he had to fight too. It was his turn to step up, and that he did. Not for himself, for everyone who would come after him, for a world free of MND. And in doing so, he showed us all exactly what WITO looks like. No matter the odds, no matter the diagnosis, choose to fight, choose your attitude, choose to smile, choose to do something. Because the mark of a person isn't what they say, it's what they do. And Dad did plenty. So today, while many people will rightly remember Dad for what he achieved, I hope we also remember the man behind it all. The dad, the husband, the mate, the pops, the choc biscuit protector, the man who taught us all that life will test us all, but we always get to choose our response. So as we trek into the next phase of life, one thing will continue to echo in the back of our heads: where is the opportunity? Thanks for everything, Dad. Love you.
I'm going to apologise in advance because I'm not expecting to get through this. I'm already struggling a little bit. I feel incredibly fortunate to have had Dad in my life for 35 years. He tested me, he supported me, he guided me, and above all else, he loved us all in his own way. And it wasn't always loud or obvious, but it was constant. It was in everything that he did. As Luke mentioned, he had a way of searching for the opportunity or for the positive side in any situation. When MND came into our lives, it set off a grenade that changed the very foundations, but somehow, in the middle of this all, it brought us closer together than ever. For 12 years, I had the absolute fortune to work side by side with him. In that time, he became more than just a dad to me. He became my mentor, my leader, my coach, and my confidant. I learnt so much for him, and those lessons are things that I will carry on with me forever. Dad had a way of bringing us together, bringing people together. He challenged us, he pushed us, and he inspired us to be better versions of ourselves. He didn't hand out praise easily, but when you got that quiet nod of approval, it meant everything. It could lift you up in a way that nothing else could. A simple well done meant the world to me. Where do you begin with the lessons that he taught us? He never just gave us the answers. He guided us to them. He asked questions. He made us think deeply about the world, about society, about who we wanted to be. And he could tell a story like no one else. He had this incredible ability to pull you in, to have you hanging on every single word, not quite sure where you would end up, but knowing that it would be worth it. You'd laugh, you'd reflect, and somehow woven into this were these quiet but powerful crumbs of wisdom, lessons that would stay with you long after the story ended, shaping how you saw the world. I'll admit I was pretty daunted when I had to start speaking on his behalf when his voice started to fail him. That was his space. That was where he thrived. But his message to me was simple. Be authentic. Don't try and be anyone else but yourself. It was such a simple piece of advice, but it grounded me every time I stepped up. And it reminded me that what really mattered wasn't perfection, it was honesty. That said, he could also be brutal in his feedback. I remember heading into front bar for the first time where I'd be joining him, and I was already incredibly nervous, and he felt it necessary to remind me, don't be funny, or don't try and be funny. Harsh but fair and very on brand. Another Neale directive many have received here today would be good luck, and I'm just changing this slightly, don't muck it up. He loved life and he lived it loudly. Play on. And for Dad, that became so much more than a footy phrase. It was a way of living. It meant taking the moment rather than waiting for the perfect one. When life threw something hard or unfair your way, he showed us how to respond, not by asking why me, but asking yourself, what can I do next? In his book, Dad references a quote. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change the way you think about it. And there was that laugh, that big booming belly laugh. You could hear it from a mile away. Dad recently, with his new book, each gave us a book each, and it had a handwritten note in it. In mine, he mentioned that I'd inherited his loud laugh, and it's something I'm very proud of. His wit, his timing, his ability to charm through just about anything. He had a spark that made people better just by being around him. And you may have heard that no one could say no to Neale, and it's true. Whether you're the Governor-General, the Prime Minister, or anyone else, saying no to him was truly difficult. Another quote from Dad that he referenced has stayed with me. If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. Sorry. So, Dad, you are that giant for me. So much of how I see the world, the way I think, the person I strive to be, comes from you. You gave me perspective, you challenged me, and you showed me what really matters. And what made you truly special is that you didn't just do this for me, you did it for so many others. You believed in lifting people up and helping them find their way forward. That's a legacy that lives in all of us. I once heard that grief is the price that we pay for love, and I loved you boundlessly. So I'll carry that grief gladly, because it comes from such a deep privilege to have had those laughs, those lessons, the challenges, and all those moments in between, the big and small, that shaped who I am today. I wouldn't trade a single one. To the world, you inspired so many, but to me, you were simply my dad, the one who guided me when I couldn't see the next step, whose laughter filled the room, whose charm and cheeky smile could light up anyone around him. In the next week or two, or the next day, we'll be welcoming a little boy into the world. I know you wanted to meet him, but he'll have your spirit and your laugh. We will forever miss you. We will forever love you.
My father meant everything to me. The way he lived his life showed me how I wanted to live mine, and he taught me the things that matter and the things that don't. I like to think that me and Dad were kindred spirits in a way. Someone close to me said our special bond was identified through little moments where we'd both make eye contact and smile at each other about something only me and him understood. We talked endlessly about politics, movies, music, Sartre and Camus, D's and Berners. My dad was a tyrant when it came to the control of the music, and anyone who knows me well knows I inherited that trait. We both like to rule the speakers with an iron fist. Some have said they haven't seen a more autocratic father-son duo since Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un when it came to deciding what everyone listened to. And they're probably right. One of Dad's favourite authors, Dostoevsky, wrote, "Nothing in the world is harder than speaking the truth, nothing easier than flattery." For Dad, I suspect the opposite was true. He found flattery quite difficult, but never had any trouble telling the truth, regardless of how brutal it happened to be. I think quite a few people at the G can vouch for that. I remember on one occasion after COVID, I went through a period where I wasn't exactly keeping my health and fitness in check. I played my first game back in local footy after the lockdowns, and admittedly I wasn't in the best shape. As always, I went over to Dad's place the next day and we started talking about the game. Straight away he asked, "How much are you weighing in at these days?" I said, "Yeah, look, tough lockdown, probably a little bit thicker than I used to be, but you know, I'm an inside midfielder now, a bit of a Paddy Cripps build." I could see him grinning as he typed out his response. When the machine finally spat it out, he said, "Well, you're not Cripper, and Cripper's not fat." In the history books, he will go down as a coach that didn't win a premiership, but I'm here today to publicly declare that simply isn't true. After my dad finished up at the D's in 2007, where he was often to remind me that he actually quit as coach and was not sacked, he took up the reins as coach of my junior footy team at Kew Rovers. After being relegated the year before, the Rovers needed a coaching savant, and since James Hird was still playing for the Bombers at the time, the Kew Rovers turned to my dad. I'm not too sure the parents knew what they were signing up their kids up for, but they found out pretty quick. This under-15s junior side was the most well-drilled football side in the country. Regular 7-minute interchanges, complex defensive zones, a share into the face if you didn't have eye contact with him while he spoke. No one had seen anything like it. But geez, we were good. Dad was generally fair and equitable with game time from what I can recall, but I do distinctly remember his fatherly bias creeping in once. At a three-quarter time huddle, we were up by a significant margin. Dad had all the magnets up on the board with me, one of the worst players in the team, one out in the square, with every other magnet pushed up the ground. He said, "Well, look, boys, Benny's going to go one out, so just clear out of the 50. A few puzzled looks went around the huddle because I was no David Neitz. But But I just remember him cheering me on from the sideline as we hammered it in inside 50 after inside 50 without any conversion. But his encouragement still rings in my ears today. This insatiable want to make him proud has never left me. Even playing country footy into my 30s, I'd always look to the sidelines to see my dad there watching me. And it felt like being 14 again. The Q Rovers under 15s ended up winning the flag that year, and I'm fairly sure a lot of kids never played footy again after that year either. A couple of weeks ago, I went over and watched the D's game with him when we beat the Hawks. Seeing his face light up when Cozzy did something brilliant was just the best, until I realised, fuck me, he's never looked at me like that. These are the moments I cherished. I didn't know that was going to be the last time we'd watch the D's together, and I'll hold on to that for the rest of my life. To Mum, you're the strongest person I know. You well and truly exceeded your vow of being with Dad through sickness and in health. And I'm just so proud of you, and I'm just so sorry. The times following being told of his diagnosis, something in me changed. My nature changed. At 21, the image I had always carried on of my strong superhero dad as invincible, and the laughter I assumed lay ahead of us was shattered in an instant. I learned to live with the sadness, and an anticipatory grief became my companion, and now what I'd been fearing has arrived. A whole new version of pain has begun to set in. I'd been preparing for this time for over a third of my life, but I still don't think I'm ready to face it. I don't know what I'm going to do without him here. When I struggled to find any pride or good in myself, he made me feel like I could be someone I could be proud of. I will miss his counsel, I will miss his jokes, I will miss him sending me songs that he liked. I will miss watching movies with him and dissecting them, like how we both thought there wasn't enough mud in the movie 1917. I will miss walking into his house and seeing him on his chair, greeting me with a warm smile and asking me how I'm doing. If I could be 1/10 of the man he was, I will be proud. I was proud to be his son. While we won't be there for any further milestones in my life, for marriage, kids, he will always be at the forefront of my mind for all of them. He can finally rest now and have a read with his old man and his sister phone. I love you, Dad. I will miss you so much. Thanks.
A couple of celebrity speakers.
When I was born, Pops couldn't hold me with his arms. He still found a way to rock me with his legs. Even when he couldn't talk, he used his machine to chat and called me and my brother Ollie cheeky monkeys. My Pops was strong, brave and courageous, and I hope I can be like him when I grow up. I miss you, Poppy. Play on.
I love Poppy very much. I wish he came back. I love every way he took me when I was born. He would rock me to sleep on his legs. I love reading to Pop, and I can still read to him. I wish he could come back to see us and take me on adventures. I wish he could come back to the big freeze. Poppy, I see you as a star in the sky. I hope you got to see me push the sliders down. I love you, Pop. Goodbye.
Cooper and Rosie Daniher, incredible. I know that Neale was a harsh judge, but he would have marked all 10 out of 10. If your kids or your grandkids turn out like the Danihers, you've parented well. Page 359 of Neale's book, when all is said and done, reads, "Great music is magical to me. It can shift my mood from the very first chord. It lifts me up, it calms me down, it makes me melancholy, but most importantly, it takes me away from the here and now issues of the day and into another realm. Life without music would seem incomplete." He then goes on to list his 30 favourite songs. It's essentially Neale's ultimate mixtape. It starts with Fields of Gold by Sting and finishes with the feather theme from Forrest Gump. So today we will be under the spell of Neale's best ofs and we'll all feel better for it. So let's look back at some images from Neale's incredible life. The Daniher brothers. They don't speak much, but they're often spoken of. Iconic in so many ways, Terry, Neale, Anthony and Chris. Please welcome 1/4 of the most famous set of brothers Hungary has ever produced, the third of 4, Anthony.
Thank you. Growing up with Neale on the farm. This photo captures a lot of our dear brother Neale and his big brother Terry, big sister Estelle on holiday in Sydney. I often find myself wondering, what was Neale thinking at that moment? Does this pose foreshadow the life that is to come? But what I will tell you, that is the very last photo ever taken of a Daniher on a beach. Once Dorothy, Chris, Colleen and I came along, summer holidays were off the agenda. Dad didn't want to buy a bus. And by the time Angela, Julie, Nerily and Fiona arrived, 11 kids, family holidays looked less like a beach and more like the Hungary footy ground, Windy Hill, here at the G, or a netball court somewhere around Australia. Mum and Dad were incredibly hard-working sheep and wheat farmers, strong in their faith and deeply passionate about sport. They raised us with very clear values: work hard, take care of one another, have great manners, play fair and be a good person. Neale absorbed all of that: the discipline, the loyalty, the love of sport and the importance of family life. In Year 7, he won the Religious Education Award at school. The seeds for the Reverend moniker were planted early. My mum gave it pride of place above the fireplace. Never mind the cabinet of sporting trophies, that was the one she was the proudest of. I think it's fair to say Neale was not destined to be on the land. When it came to the jobs around Hillview, he had a knack of disappearing at the right time. If he was in the ear reach of Dad, Dad would yell out, "Can you bring me over the wrench, Neale?" And Neale will turn up with 2 spanners. Dad would grumble under his breath and finally he would get the wrench. But Neale would look at me with a wry smile. He knew what he was doing. There was another little project that we used to do, was rock collecting, and my mum would say to Dad, "Can you just get the kids out of their house?" So Dad would say, "Let's go, we're collecting rocks." He'd put the trailer on the back of the ute and we had one particular paddock that was a problem. There were 7 of us running behind the trailer, throwing rocks in the trailer. We'd done a deal before we started. We said, "Well, what's in it for us, Dad?" And Dad said, "1 cent a rock." So off we went. We filled up the first trailer, we filled up the second. And the next thing we know, the trailer hit something and there was a yell. Neale had thrown himself under the trailer, broken his leg. He said, "I'm not doing this anymore for 1 cent a rock." He had a way of getting out of things. But Neale loved the shearing shed, the camaraderie, the stories, the people. He loved his Uncle Jack, Cobby and Ethel, who would stir up Dad with his political views. They were amazing shearers and amazing storytellers. At each smoko, Neale would arrive and listen and partake in Mum's morning teas with scrumptious sandwiches, warm scones with jam and cream on top, and the biggest teapot you ever seen. It was about 5 litres. At 13, off Neale went to St Pat's in Goulburn as a boarder, and to be honest, we all felt very sorry for him leaving the farm in the car with Mum and Dad. It was a world away. They played rugby instead of footy, cadets, which he disliked enormously, freezing winters and food that was no substitute for Mum's tucker. Every school holiday he'd come home with an earache, which somehow kept him on the couch for a week, being lovingly looked after by his mum. By week 2, he'd made a full recovery. He was back enjoying one of his great loves, music. He would come home with bands such as Supertramp, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, then later America, Hall & Oates and Eagles. He'd bring it home with him, different bands, different sounds. He shaped our taste in music. That was Neale. Even though he was away, he had this way of influencing the rest of us. He brought home stories. He brought home new ideas. He widened our world. Thankfully, he eventually convinced Dad to let him move to Assumption College for years 11 and 12, where he could play footy and cricket. He found his tribe here, mentors who would shape him for life. That's where something really started to take shape in Neale. But there were signs already with the we'd seen back at home. There were endless backyard cricket matches at Hillview. Terry bowled at hefty speeds, Chris and I chipped in, and Neale would bat on the 6-metre concrete pitch that Dad had laid for us. No pads, no gloves, no boxes, just day after day, summer after summer. Hillview backyard cricket was serious business, and Terry just couldn't get him out. Even when the stumps were replaced by 2 12-gallon drums, Terry still couldn't get him out. And while he loved his sport, he liked it on his terms. Neale hated running on hard ground, and at Hillview, that was pretty much all there was in summer. Yet, you'd see the rest of us charging around anywhere, working hard, trying to get fit, but not Neale. He was always searching for that one soft patch of grass. If he found it, that's where he'd run. If he didn't, well, let's just say his enthusiasm dropped off pretty quickly. He'd even drive into Hungary looking for grass. He was determined. But maybe that endless search says more than we realised at the time, because he was always someone who believed there was a better patch out there, even when the odds said otherwise. When it came to playing footy as a young man, there was plenty of green grass. At one of our amazing carnivals we have in the country called the Letona Cup in Leeton, it's a huge sporting day which brought together the best footy teams from the district. Neale was playing in the under-15s. Being from the Northern Riverina, one of the smaller competitions, we were up against the bigger towns, the stronger towns, Wagga, Griffith and Narrandera. Our team made it through to the grand final, which was a huge achievement in itself. With the game on the line, Neale marked the ball at centre-half forward and the siren went. One of the opposition's boys yelled out, "Hey mate, if you kick that, we're getting you." Neale simply went back and calmly slotted it from 40 metres to win the carnival. And then let's just say there was chaos. Or when the 17-year-old Neale, playing in the Hungary seniors, he turned the 1978 Northern Riverina grand final, kicking 3 goals in the last quarter to bring the cup back to Hungary against Four Corners. So our beautiful brother was showing signs very early on of the person he would become. When you're one of 11 kids, it can't be all about you. You're not special just because of where you sit in the family. But over time, you can become someone special. And Neale did. He had that calmness, that composure, that sense of timing, that quiet confidence in himself. He was never fazed by the noise around him. He was such great fun to be around. By the time he left home, those qualities were deeply set. Even as a young bloke, Neale had worked something out. If the moment was there, you took it, you played on. He wasn't the kid who stood back and waited. He stepped in and lived it. Back then, His world wasn't complicated. It was about family, work ethic, sport, music, laughter, and being part of things. He found joy in the moment. He leaned into life, exactly as it came. That's how he was, even back then. And to us, that's what we remember the most from those early years. In recent days, we've heard Neale described as a hero, a legend, courageous and brave, and he was all of those things. But to us, he was simply a brother. A beautiful brother, a little boy, a determined look on his face, flexing on the beach with a whole life in front of him. The one who laughed with us, he teased us, gave us advice, whether we asked for it or not, and always stood beside us. We'll never forget the sound of his big, unmistakable laugh, his quick wit, and that mischievous spark that made him so uniquely Neale. Thank you.
Neale Daniher needs little introduction to Bomber fans. This young halfback flanker has been impressing them with his ability for some time now.
Smith has a hurried kick up there towards the full forward position, but a good mark to Daniher. Just about the best player on the ground.
Neale Daniher was brought up in Hungarian central New South Wales, where along with his three brothers, Terry, Anthony and Chris, he showed an aptitude for football from an early age.
Of course, it gives me a buzz, and it gives Terry a lift too to be playing with his brothers. It's always terrific to play with your brothers rather than play against them.
And of course, if he kicks this, the Bombers have won it. And what a game this has been. No doubt, the hero of the match was Neale Daniher.
The quiet country lad became an idol at Windy Hill.
Handball accepted by Neale Daniher. Daniher's kick, and could be a goal! It is, it's a great goal from Neale Daniher.
Chance here. Neale Daniher's looking a mighty player considering he's been out of the game so long.
3 knee reconstructions restricted Daniher to 82 games in 11 years at Essendon, but many still regard him as a champion defender.
Neale's going to be, and should be, hopefully, a very exciting person in the 1990s for football.
After a dismal season, Melbourne can only look to the future, and Neale Daniher is seen as a coach who can make a difference.
We want to be able to instill a bit of pride back into the Melbourne Football Club. We want our supporters to have a bit of hope.
I'm really excited to be involved in the rebuilding process. It's going to be a great challenge, and it's a great opportunity for me.
He just became the most revered figure for that group of boys.
We went from easily the worst team in the competition to a prelim final in his first year.
Our club will never forget Neale, the Reverend, who seemingly single-handedly reignited passionate Demon supporters.
Russell Robertson, who was so vocal in his support of the coach.
He gave me tough love, but he loved me. I know he loved me, and he loved all of us players.
He gave me the hardest and toughest love of my footy career at the time when I needed it most.
Have a look at Neale Daniher. He's gone for the front row on the coach's box.
His spirit, his dedication, his sincerity, his skill, it's everything. He's really made a big difference to the club.
Neale Daniher, the man they respect, the man they admire.
How about breaking your own leg to get out of rock karting? Total commitment. Thank you, Anthony.
I sat with Neale at an MCC function towards the beginning of his fight with MND, and Brad Green was just coaching at Carlton. He was the guest speaker on the day, and Brad was asked to share a few words of advice that he might have taken from Neale that he's taking into his coaching career. And one of those words Greedy came up with was empathy. And Neale leaned over to me and goes, "Empathy? You must have me confused with fags." He let out then a very boisterous, very familiar, rollicking, fully engaged laugh that he reserved exclusively for his own jokes.
As a coach, his sense of team was always to the forefront. He was a man who put the collective team goal before individual pursuits and was the ultimate champion of the we before me mentality. He preached about the spectrum where selfish sits at one end and selfless at the other. He taught his players that nothing great can get done with selfish people. He was a storyteller and he was a motivator. The back of the bus is one of Neale's favourite metaphors about earning respect through hard work, resilience and actions. The very back seat of the bus was exclusively reserved for the most respected players or teams. Younger or less experienced players or teams sat in the front and had to earn their way back to the back. You did not get handed your place, you earned it with Neale. Neale loved the 2021 MFC Premiership success, publicly praising the team for making its way to the back seat of the bus.
He told us one day the story of the wildebeest and the antelope. The story was about a hunting pride of lions and the difference in the fight between the antelope and the wildebeest. In short, he said the lions crept up on the antelope, made their move, pounced, and the antelope just accepted his fate. He rolled over and was easy prey. Then it was the wildebeest's turn. But the pack of lions had a different opponent. This time the lions pounced, but the wildebeest didn't roll over. He kicked one of the lions in the guts, he chewed one's ear, he rolled in and bowled over one of them. And he goes, boys, in the end, the lions got the wildebeest. But the wildebeest went down fighting. He said, I don't care if we lose, don't be an antelope, play like a wildebeest.
That story was from over 25 years ago, and it's because of hearing stories like this that the boys who played for Neale were not surprised in the way that he took on his fight with MND. Despite the challenges dished up to Neale, he didn't just lay down. He chose to fight with the spirit of the wildebeest. He said he would, he did, and we're in awe of not only what he's done, but how he's done it.
We know Neale was Australian of the Year, and in a very Aussie way, he had a strong sense of egalitarianism. It was we before me, and he did not like it if you try to get ahead of yourself in any way. Individual success was acknowledged, but only in Neale's special way. James remembers Neale calling up one day to tell him that he'd made the All-Australian team, a pretty big individual honour. Neale said, Junior, that must have made a mistake. You're in the All-Australian team. And then he let out a bellowing laugh. And James wasn't sure whether he'd actually made the team or Neale was just having a laugh with him. In the end, he gave James a quick congratulations and said, well done. But just remember, you started as a tagger, and All-Australian or not, you're tagging this week as well. Don't get ahead of yourself.
Or Jeff Farmer, the Wizard. In a Queen's birthday game, Neale dragged him after a poor first half, ripping his magnet off the board and throwing it out of the coach's box. He wouldn't be coming back on the ground for the rest of the day. Ben Beams broke his arm 5 minutes into the third quarter. Neale had no choice but to put the Wiz back on the ground. The Wiz ends up kicking 9 goals in the second half. The Wizard remembers the post-game review with the coach. He walked into Neale's office the next day with a bit of a strut. Perhaps an apology for the brutal half-time spray was coming his way. Maybe Neale would actually admit he got this one wrong. Sure enough, Neale was ready, and he had the highlight reel ready to go for the review. But not for the 9 second-half goals he kicked, but it was the 9 things he did wrong in the first half.
As skipper, I had a few meetings with Neale, some longer, thought-provoking ones, and some short and sharp ones. This particular meeting was during a period where we'd lost a few games in a row, and Neale sent me on a mission to get a temperature check of the spirit of the group. So I got around to, Ooze, Nico, Robbo, Chal, a few of the boys, a few of the leaders, and I come back to Neale and say, mate, I think the boys are cooked. Everything's pretty intense, and I reckon we just need to ease the tension, maybe have a bit of fun during the week. Neale didn't say too much. He goes, thanks for the feedback, big need it. Let me think about it, I'll have something for the meeting. Well, the meeting rolls around, and I'm feeling pretty relaxed about things. And Neale comes in, he goes, bang. Gets the review going. What was that? Horrible performance. What is going on in this moment of the game? And he's got stuck right into us. And his tension's probably easing, and I'm sitting there absolutely internally fuming. We've just had this conversation, mate. What are you doing to me? This is not how things are supposed to pan out. After the meeting, I just storm out of this meeting room, straight to the gym. I need a few moments to compose myself, to confront Neale. And so I did. I finally walked in. I said, mate, what happened there? We just had this conversation and you've just gone and done exactly the opposite of what we said we're going to do. He looked at me and he goes, mate, you stick to playing, I'll stick to coaching. Pretty quick meeting, that one. And it's fair to say that he had a fired-up skipper ready to go for the next week.
Neale never missed a trick. I had my own quick flyby. I had a reasonable year in '98 and Brisbane showed a bit of interest in a trade. I was summoned to Neale's office in the off-season for a chat. Neale said to me, what do you reckon, Hoppy? I said, well, realistically, we're on the improve. I'm happy with my mates. I'd like to stay a one-club player. Waiting for Neale's reaction. He said, yep, that's good. We value you, get your body right. We still see some upside. Phew, perfect. I thought, this is okay. As the meeting ended and I got up to leave. On the way out of the meeting, as he opened the door, he said, hey Hoppy, just one thing. If they offer up a Voss, Ackermanis or Lappin, we might have to have a good look at it. 3 superstars for a little back pocket. And again, that trademark, raucous, boisterous cackle laugh came before the punchline had even been finished. A little bit of humour just to ease the tension.
As part of today, we reached out to guys across the whole spectrum of his coaching career. And Neale, you wouldn't be all that surprised at the feedback, mate. It all centred around brutal honesty and also the annoying habit that you had of being pretty much spot on most of the time. There are plenty of sprays, but we don't have enough time for those up here today. So later we'll have a beer and a laugh and reminisce about the time when Andrew McLeod had 11 touches in a quarter. That's right, Wardy. 11! He could give a good spray, the man. And there are many stories where we thought we were about to send Neale into a cardiac arrest at some point.
Neale has sacked or dropped most of us, except his golden boy, Big Nita. And despite the direct feedback, we have a group of blokes who love and idolise the man. Clint Bizzle remembers a 2-page handwritten letter on the eve of his 150th game, reminding him of why he was so important to the team. Anthony Ingerson was told to believe he could become one of the top centre-half backs in the league and walked out of the meeting feeling inches taller. Guy Rigoni was given confidence and support that he was going to make it back up to top-level footy after a significant back surgery. And Jeff White remembers Neale crashing his Bucks party. Everyone went silent. Neale reached in the esky, cracked a beer and said, the party's just started, boys.
And in more recent years, beyond the footy field, it's fair to say that the bond between Neale and his era of boys only got stronger. Even when he lost his voice, he never lost his spot at the head of the table. He was the chairman of selectors for the long lunch team, selecting and even placing exactly where everyone was going to sit at the lunch, providing ongoing feedback. He set the key agenda items and made sure that the laugh was never too far away.
He wanted to make sure we all stayed together and supported each other post our footy days, always concerned with how everyone was and how their families were going. Neale wanted to catch up at one of our old Demons Rum Walk Saturday morning sessions and gave me the heads up that it was his shout for breakfast. Fair to say, word got out and the participation rate for that week rose from around the average of 8 to over 30. Never did we have so much fun watching Nealo's face as he put his credit card over the counter. We finally got one up on him. We want to thank Jan, Loz, Luke, Beck and Ben for lending Neale to us for so long. He was committed to our gang and such a father figure and mentor for many of us. We've been privileged to become closer to you, the broader Daniher family, his friends, the wider MND family, and we'd hate to say it, but we even now like a few of his old Essendon former teammates that he connected us with. We're immensely proud of the profound effect that Neale has had on so many in his fight against MND, and we join with everybody across Australia to celebrate the extraordinary life of a national hero.
At the same time, there's a very personal hole that will be left for all of us in his group of old demons. We say goodbye to a mate, our coach, and the conductor of connection that has sustained our group for 3 decades. Neale, we love you, we applaud you, we thank you, we will remember you often, and we will play on.
Thanks, Nita and Hoppy. Incredible memories. And just for the record, the Wizards' 9 goals were exactly 26 years ago today. Incredible. We now hear from someone who shared a deep and enduring friendship with Neale. They met as fathers at their boys' boarding school, and once they did, they enjoyed a lot of red wine together. They never stopped talking. Please welcome a great mate of Neale's, a very relaxed farmer, although perhaps not right now, from the same town as Jeff Farmer, Tambula, Cam Taylor.
Thank you, Hamish. Hello, everyone. When Jan asked me to speak today, the last thing she said, make sure you give Neale a bit of a roast, Cam. Message received, Janny. So, everyone, just for context, and if you're wondering who this is talking today, Nealo has written 2 books, When All Is Said and Done and The Power of Choice, both still available in the bargain bin at Kmart and all good truck stops around Australia. In his first book, When All Is Said and Done, Neale mentions a handshake just before Christmas 2013. I said, mate, that's not an Hungary handshake. He replied, sorry, Cam, I've got something going on. His diagnosis came a few months later. Family and friendship. We'll step back now to 2009. Sarah and my Ben became mates with Jan and Neale's Ben at Hale School in Perth. Neale was the General Manager of footy operations at the West Coast Eagles, and Jan the same position at the West Coast Fever. And we were Tambulat farmers. One Friday night, I was sent around to Neale and Jan's to pick up Ben. Knocked on the door. Neale opened the door and said, who are you? I'm Ben's dad, Cam Taylor. And he replied, yeah, righto, mate. Ben came out and I attempted some light banter. Eagles going well? He looked at me and without saying anything, take your son and nick off. Good to meet you, Neale. Might see you around. Yeah, righto, mate. Bit of an ass, I thought, as we walked to the car. Little did I know that brief foot in the door moment would lead to a wonderful friendship with Neale, Jan and their family, particularly Jan and the kids, as they were really nice people. Things moved along over the next few months, and gradually Jan and Neale came into our lives and vice versa. Nealo had a few days off from work. Jan was busy and we had a bit of a quiet time on the farm. I suggested to Nealo that he comes camping down to the Donnelly River with a few farming mates, a boys' weekend. He brought along his mate Barry, and fair to say, sort of unprepared. No food, no swag, but plenty of beer, red wine and a boombox. Neilo loves his music, and soon enough the tunes were playing, the beers were flowing and the barbie cranking, until we noticed the wind getting up. Well, that night turned into a disaster. The biggest low-pressure system of the year formed just over the sand dune from where we were camping. The tent flooded, hail, sleet, freezing cold, an absolute disaster. We packed up the next morning, Neil and Barry looking like drowned rats, and headed home. Neil maintained that it was that night that gave him MND. Maybe the idea behind the big freeze of the G came from that night. Neilo, funnily enough, hated losing. Didn't matter what it was, hated it. I loved it. When a lay-down misère came my way in cards, or taking the pot after a round of golf. What goes around comes around, he would always say. Well, the next round of golf certainly didn't come around for Neilo. Mates, Phil and Ing, Sarah and I decided to take Neil and Jan to the Abrolhos Islands for an extended long weekend. And on the way, we stopped off in Geraldton for a game of golf. Neil had organised a round with a bloke from Main Roads, WA, versus Phil and myself. Well, we observed Neilo sniggering before we teed off, and he promptly let us know that Main Roads, and I apologise, I can't remember his name, played off a very low handicap. A stitch-up, some would say. Well, after 9 holes, Phil and I were 7 down, and the cheap talk was flowing. You're by. Shall we head to the clubhouse now, fellas? Lovely day for golf. I looked at Phil, and Phil looked at me, and we both smiled. I think you can guess you can all guess where this story is going. Yes, we reeled off the next 9 holes in a row. Some would say the greatest comeback since Dame Nellie Melba, Johnny Farnham, even a Bradbury. Well, Main Roads threw his clubs in the ute and roared off. No beers, barely a handshake. Whereas Neilo, he was coming with us to the Abrolhos. I can assure everyone here today that story was recounted often over the years. The Abrolhos, I think, was Jan and Neil's favourite time while living in WA. Remote, windswept and alive with history. We dined on crayfish, pink snapper and bald gin groper with our mates and hosts, Greg and Susan, treating us like royalty. The Abrolhos was the scene of Nealo's first song-off, where he would come with his playlist of songs and challenge us to name the song, the band and sometimes the year. His playlist covered all years and genre. His boombox would be front and centre for the next few years as family and friends got together, whether it was in Broome, Augusta, Perth or Dunsborough. Neilo would set himself up in the corner, red wine in hand, and groove away to the tunes. Happy and wonderful times. Neilo and crabs. It was in Dunsborough where we all gathered at Uncle Michael's place, and it was decided that we needed crabs for dinner. We tried a new method of catching the crabs, whereby we would tow 2 or 3 catches behind the boat with a bit of rope. The idea being, when you see a crab, you dive down and catch it with your bare hands. Well, we drifted into a row of crab nets belonging to old mate sitting over the way, about 50 metres away. Neale yelled out, "Crabs!" and dived down. Well, old mate roared across, and fair to say he wasn't happy. I was begging forgiveness when Neale popped his head up and yelled, "Yee-haw, look at this beauty!" I thought that was quite funny, but anyway. So many stories, so little time. Janny, Loz and Mick, Luke and Jess, Beck and Drew, Ben and Chloe, and all the families. Funny how a foot in the door moment has turned into a wonderful friendship, and we're all richer for it. Neale, you really were a funny guy, or so you kept telling us. Quick-witted, with a booming laugh, a loud and proud family man. A man who united a nation with his own foot in the door moment. You chose to fight. You chose to change the status quo. I can hear Neale now. Yeah, righto, mate. Thank you.
Thanks, Cam. It's a tough crowd. Great insight into your great mate, Neale. To reflect on a friendship forged through football and then carried on well beyond, please welcome Neale's long-time colleague who became a great mate and a confidant, and he's just one of the best men in football. Please welcome Chris Fagan.
First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to Jan and the family for giving me this privilege to stand up here and say a few words about Neale. Neale gave me a job 29 years ago. I worked out that's a long time ago, 29 years ago. God only knows why he gave me that job, but I'm so grateful that he did. We've remained close friends ever since. He's no doubt had a huge influence on my life, and I have a lot to thank him for. I think on days like this, it's important to tell stories. And I've got a few about Neale and his influence on me. A lot of people who have spoken today have already spoken about how blunt and honest he was. And I got a dose of that pretty early days when I started coaching at the D's with him. We would have training sessions and I'd do my bit as the development coach, put out the cones and help the players with their skill development and all that sort of stuff, and then we'd have meetings occasionally, and I was a bit shy when I first came over here from Tassie and I didn't have much to say in those meetings. And one day he sort of pulled me aside and he said, "Listen here, Fags, I didn't get you here just to shift the cones around." That was sort of code for I think you've got a bit more to offer than shifting the cones around. You've got some good opinions and I want to hear them. So it was good feedback to get, and that's the great thing about Neale. He wouldn't hesitate to give you that feedback, but you always knew that it come from a great place. He could give a fierce spray, which you would have heard Nita and Hoppy talk about. I always knew when he was going to go in and give those fierce sprays. And so I made sure that when I went to those team meetings, I didn't get his line of vision. I always sat to the side because I was always worried he was going to have a crack at me. So fierce he was. He was probably at his emotional worst when we were playing Essendon, his old team, against his old coach, Kevin Sheedy. And I used to sit in the coach's box with him and he'd be off his head in those games. And I remember one day we were playing them here at the MCG, and it would have been about 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. The D's had a good lead. Nita had kicked a few goals. But the only thing we were really worried about was that, what's the name of the Essendon goal kicker? Matty Lloyd. I'm getting stuck up here. Matthew Lloyd. He was on fire, and he looked like he was the only threat. And I was the forward line coach at the time, and Neale said, I'm going to have to move Nita down to full back. And I thought, he's going to move Nita down to full back. We're 20 points in front. He's on fire. And I said, I don't guess one of your better ideas, mate. And I thought, oh, what did I just say? And he looked at me with one of those looks that only he could give. And he decided to go with me, but he said, you better get it right, mate. You better have this right. Anyway, it was the most nervous last quarter that I've ever had in my life in the coach's box. Fortunately, we won the game. At the end of the game, Neale said, he was all happy, of course. He goes, you want to come out for dinner with Jan and I tonight and bring Ursula along? I said, yeah, that'd be great, mate. We got to the dinner, and he said to me, that was good today. Well done. One of his favourite sayings, I used to go and visit him a fair bit when I've obviously been living in Brisbane the last 10 years, but I always catch up with him when I could. And he always had some advice to give me. And early days in Brisbane, it was pretty tough up there. We didn't win too many games. We won 5 games in my first year and 5 games in my second year. And I remember visiting Neale at the end of that second year, and he had a bit of advice for me. He said, Fags, as an AFL coach, you've got to be a great actor sometimes. And I know exactly what he was talking about, because when you lose week after week after week and you're the coach, you're the one that has to stay positive and keep everybody upbeat. So he was always trying to give me those sorts of lessons to help me with my coaching. He was a fierce competitor. We used to play tennis at the Junction Oval on the clay courts down there with the assistant coaches. Neale was the best tennis player by far. In fact, he was an amazing sports person. But funnily enough, I didn't like playing as Neale's partner. I preferred to be on the other team with the other bloke. We were definitely going to lose, but it was better to be there, because if you played with him and you made a mistake or you made a skill error, he'd just give it to you. So, I was always happy to be on the other side. We've heard today that family was super important to Neale. And I can assure you that when Ursula and I moved from Hobart to Melbourne, we didn't have any family at all here in Melbourne. And Neale and Jan went out of their way to make us feel a part of their family. And we're eternally grateful for that, because I think without that early support, maybe we wouldn't have lasted too long here in Melbourne. But as it turned out, we had 10 great years together. So thanks to Jan and Neale for that. In my office down at Brighton Homes Arena, I've got every one of the beanies from the 12 MND campaigns sitting on a shelf behind my desk. I've got them there for a reason. Every time I'm feeling sorry for myself, or we've had a bad day or a loss, I look at them, and it just reminds me to push on and find a way to get better. There's a saying that I feel strongly about, and this saying is, people don't always remember what you say, but they do remember how you make them feel. Neale made me feel valued. He gave me confidence. He believed in me. He helped me sort of overcome, I suppose, my imposter syndrome, that maybe I didn't belong as a coach at AFL level because I didn't play at the level. He just did those sorts of things for me over and over again. And I'm so thankful to him for that. I still remember the day that he called me to tell me that he had MND. And to be honest with you, I didn't know what MND was. I'd not heard much about it, and I figure pretty much none of us had heard much about it until Neale came on the scene. But he told me that he had it, and he said, and that's the last time we're going to talk about it. I went back to my computer and Googled MND and discovered what it was, and how there was a fair chance that he might not be with us for much longer, and it was a bit of a shock. And I was only talking to my wife Ursula the other day when he said to me, and that's the last time we talk about it. He's continued on for 13 years. I've caught up with him over and over and over again, and not once in that 13 years has he ever talked about MND or ever complained about what was going on with him. So I figure that's absolutely amazing, because I don't think that I could show that strength that he showed. I actually don't know how he kept going. And through all that, he still remained a mentor and a coach to me. I'd often get texts from him, words of encouragement, words of advice. Better get rid of that bloke out of your team. I don't think he's helping you much, mate. All those sorts of things. But I just found that amazing that he kept doing that, even when he was dealing with what he was dealing with. So, yeah, I've been so fortunate to be a mate of his. One of my favourite moments from the 2024 Grand Final, and it's the only thing I coded from the game. You boys sitting at the front there understand coding. The only thing I coded from that game was in the last quarter, Joey Daniher, who's sitting up there, snapped a goal. And I knew it was Joey's last game, and the cameras flashed up to the Daniher family in the stands, and there was Neale. And that's the only thing I coded from that game. It's an everlasting memory for me of the bloke who gave me my opportunity to work first of all in the AFL, for him to be there on that day and see that, and for his nephew to kick that goal was one of those great moments in my life. Throughout my coaching career at Brisbane, I've used Neale's stories and his approach to help my boys develop resilience. I've bought every player a copy of both of his books. I don't know how many of them will actually read it, but I hope they go ahead and do that, because it's invaluable information about how to live a great life. And I honestly believe too that these books should be standard textbooks in all secondary schools, because there's so much to learn from all of the things that he has chosen to pass on to us through what he's learnt in going through the illness that he's had. Just to finish off, I've got three heroes in my life. My dad, my mum and Neale. They're the people who They're the people who have impacted my life most in a positive sort of way. And I'd just like to finish by saying thank you to Neale for making this world a better place. Thank you.
After Neale's family and the official party have departed, those here at the MCG will be invited to make their way outside of Gate 2 to form a guard of honour for Neale. We ask you to remain in your seats until the family and the official party have left the arena, if that's okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are able, would you now please stand as Neale is taken to his pallbearers. Neale was the best of humans, teacher to us all, a man who showed us what is possible, how to live a life full of purpose, and to live, importantly, without complaint. He turned personal adversity into national inspiration. He showed us the attitude we choose each day is entirely up to us. I think it's fair to say he changed the way many of us look at the world and the cards we've been dealt. He never asked much of us because he knew a little from many could change everything. Some are measured by what they won on the field. Neale will always be measured by what he refused to lose off it. His hope, his humour, his heart. He never asked us to feel sorry for him. He just asked us to fight alongside of him. And the country picked up the beanie and answered collectively. We are a better community because of you. Neale, you lost your voice and you are gone, but your message remains very loud. We honour you today with our grief, and we will honour you ongoing with our doing. The world feels less without you, Neale, but much better because you were here. We acknowledge those entrusted with carrying Neale on his final journey, his children-in-laws, Luke and Ben, his brothers Terry and Chris, and his son-in-law, Drew Howe.